Well, good evening, everyone. Welcome to our second live broadcast. I think, again, usual story. There's lots of people that have helped to put this together, but none so more than Tim, our own Tim Murphy, who has been gallant in all of his time and effort that he's put into getting this thing up and running on a weekly basis. So thanks, Tim, for all your hard work. So unfortunately, I don't have my little bell with me to get your attention, but I'm sure because we're all sitting at home, that's a different situation. Anyway, so as you know, this evening we have our monthly league competition. It's our second last one. So it's great that we're able to continue with our league. Everyone has put a lot of work into the league, so I think it's great that we can continue with it. So our judge this evening is Iñaki Hernández, known to most of you, I'm sure, but just to give you a little bit of background, Iñaki is from Spain, and he's a fellow of the Irish Photographic Association, and he's also a fellow of the Royal Photographic Society, held in great international esteem, I must say, specialising in architectural photography. And I'm sure you've met him here in the club as a judge in previous competitions. And as you know, Iñaki calls it like it is, but is a very, very helpful judge. Paul will be posting the results directly after this meeting, and he'll also be posting the results of the processing challenge. If you remember, he sent out an image recently, and looking for people to come up with their take on that image. So next week, we're bringing you, at long last, our own Martin Duggan. He's had, I think, at least one attempt, if not two attempts in the club, and they were all cut short, to bring us his take on photographing events like the Dragon of Shandon, and I suppose specifically the Dragon of Shandon, a very difficult event, as I know myself. So Martin is going to walk us through and give us a good oversight on photographing difficult events like that. All the people that were in Scotland, I'd like to just give a shout out to everybody. I hope all your images are processed at this stage. And in the next week or so, I will be contacting you, looking for your best images. We're going to do a night, an evening here with the best images. I'm not sure how we'll present it yet. I need to tie up with Tim as to how we'll present that. I have some ideas that I want to run by Tim first, but get your images ready anyway. Okay, so we're working on the revised schedule as well, so we should be in a position, I think, maybe by the end of the week or certainly early next week, to email out the schedule for the rest of our season. And obviously we won't be running it to the 2 hours session that we would in the club, but I think we'll have something varied and something interesting for everybody. So, and I suppose on that front, I hope everybody is just, using your time as wisely as we can and learning new processes. And I've been doing a lot on Photoshop myself, and just, I suppose, tackling things that would have kind of scared me in Photoshop up to now. So, it's a question of spending, what I do is to spend maybe an hour and a half on the computer, and I come down, I come out and do a little bit of gardening or whatever, and I go up again for another hour. So it's just small chunks, really. I came across a fantastic Facebook site, if anybody is interested. It's called LE Mag. So it's LE, it's for long exposure, and Mag for magazine, MAG. Check it out. You will see some of the world's best long exposure photographers posting on it on a regular basis. They also do a magazine, a monthly magazine, and they do a yearbook as well of all the best images that appeared on the website. But very, very, very good. Some great names there that I recognise from posting stuff tough and long exposure. But look, we're all into our own type of photography, so whatever floats your boat, I would recommend that you just spend a bit more time kind of honing your skills. So look, without further ado, that's it. We'll get on with our competition. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. Hope you enjoy the evening.
So thank you very much for asking me to take part in tonight's session for Core Camera Group. The first thing that I would like to say is thank to all participants. It's not easy to put work forward to be assessed, and it takes courage to put it on the line to be assessed by somebody else. This is basically a subjective matter as well, so it doesn't mean that it's good or bad. Different assessors or judges have different opinions. Even the same assessor may have different opinions on different days. So let's have a bit of fun, take it with a pinch of salt. And what I'm going to do is try to comment on every single image, a few short comments. And then I would like to concentrate maybe on a few images that really caught my eye for different reasons in the color section and in the mono section. So thank you for that. I'm going to share my screen now, and hopefully we can start. So if you can see my screen now?
Yeah, I can see that there.
Okay, perfect. So the first image is called Copper Coast Dawn. Beautiful tonality, very well controlled tones, and beautiful rays coming down from the sky as well. A couple of things that I would like to mention very, very briefly about this image. First of all is the dark tones in this rock. Perhaps they're a tiny bit over dark. It would be nice to have them a tiny bit more visible. The other thing I would say, and this is a recurring topic that is going to happen during the session today, dust spots. I've seen an awful lot of dust spots in many of the images. Sometimes it might not be a dust spot, but it may look like as if it were a dust spot. And take the example of this little dot here. I think it's part of a cloud, but give no room to any assessor or any judge to misinterpret that and maybe think that it's a dust spot. So if in doubt, touch it up, make sure it's not there in order to avoid any potential conflict, and you'll be safer for that. I was very humbled to take part in my first sitting ever in the Royal Photographic Society a couple of weeks ago in Bristol, looking at associate and fellowship panels. We saw an awful lot of panels in 2 days. Not one image on one panel had a dust spot. I'm going to emphasize today that the importance of that. If you have a dust spot in an image, no matter how small it is, your image will be out, disqualified, your panel will be gone. And you could have spent months or even years preparing a fellowship panel or an associate panel. Be absolutely super critical of these things when it comes to judging or assessment, okay? The next image is called Dublin Bay Sunrise. And again, lovely tonality, very muted colors. It's a pity perhaps here that is a bit too dark as well in that area. What I'm going to do is I'm going to probably minimize this to the side. And again, you can see dust spot here, dust spot in here as well, very visible. Be careful with those things. I would have probably, another one here, another one here. I would have probably liked this pinky reddish tonality, could have been emphasized as well by virtue of perhaps controlling that red channel a bit more and take out those red tones a bit more. Pigeon House, again, a nice image. I think that this reflection is beautiful. It could have been enhanced in terms of the red tones as well. You could even do a selection in this image. You can do it in Lightroom, you can do it in Photoshop, and give it a bit more clarity, a bit more contrast, and emphasizing those beautiful red tonalities and those beautiful reflections in the water here, okay? It's called Backstreet. Again, I don't know what this is taken, probably Portugal by the red, it says P, I assume it's Portugal. There's a lot of broken image there, as you can see. I am not really going to take that into much consideration, bearing in mind that this is a projected, probably the resolution of the file is not great, or there's some artifact there. I'm not going to be too strict on that basis, but beautiful tones. I mean, very striking blue with the yellow tonality of the car. This is called, I believe, Into the Mist. I think this is a bit of a missed opportunity because, I mean, there's a huge amount of highlight in there. There's no detail in the sky whatsoever, and that's fine. The weather is what it is, and the weather was like that. But perhaps I would have liked to see more engagement, a bit more rhythm into this image by emphasizing something about the mountaineers coming up or coming down from the hill, as opposed to an image that you have all these haze here on the left, and you have very, very white skies, which the weather obviously wasn't great. But I think it's a bit of a lost opportunity to take something a bit much more engaging than a generic shot of the hill coming up or down. Flowing scarf, nice image, nice model. It seems to me that this right area, probably the shadow tones have been opened a bit too much, because if you can see, you probably don't perceive it there, but if you look at it in the big screen, you can see some little artifacts in this side of the wall. So I get the feeling that this tonality in here, the shadows, were opening slightly too much, creating a bit of artifacts in the image. But nonetheless, beautiful image, the white and the red complementing really well. The pose of the model, very, very good. And this arch, coincidentally or not, forming a nice arch as well in conjunction with the arch. So it's very nice overall. This is called Long Pier. And again, you can see a dot spot in there. Okay, and I think there might be one there as well. A bit too bright, in my opinion. I think it would have been toned down a tiny bit. Obviously, the tonality is deliberate. The processing of the image is deliberate, and I have nothing to object to that. That is a preferential choice. But in my opinion, the image is a bit too bright for my liking. I think tonalities could have been enhanced a bit more. So yeah, I'll leave it there. This is an image called Poppies. And again, I feel it's a bit soft overall. There's not a very central point of sharpness overall in the image. It's nice to have this here, but again, there's some distracting in here, some distracting elements. I'm not too sure that is depth of field. I think there's been some manipulation carried out. I might be wrong, but it looks as if some touching has been done in post-processing. And what I'm missing in this image is some strong focal point with a very clearly defined focal point. It's a bit soft overall. This is an image from Glencoe, if I'm not mistaken, in Scotland. It's a very typical image. A lot of people doing landscape and seascapes, landscape in this case, go to this location, beautiful location. Very well controlled, shutter speed. The movement is very well controlled. The highlights are well controlled in here. Sometimes that tends to be a bit too bright. The beautiful positioning of the tree, the mountain, the skies, etc. This is an image that I would like to comment on in more detail later on when we do the whole round at the very end, okay? This is called Red Squirrel on show. Again, this is very sharp. The squirrel is very sharp. The background is far too distracting. There's too many lines here. Obviously, not always can you control that when you do this kind of photography, but the important thing is that the squirrel is pin sharp, the eyes are pin sharp, and again, as a matter of coincidence, it's funny how this branch of the tree nearly kind of mirrors the movement of the tail. It's a nice composition. It works well. I was amazed at the toes here, how long they are, but nice image overall with the knot here as well. So good tonality, good composition. This image, I believe, is called 3-2-1. And one of the major problems with this image would be a bit of softness in the image. I know it's difficult to capture speed of the horses, and I would imagine that the shutter speed wasn't fast enough. Maybe you're talking at 1,000th of a second or something like that. You can see that the eyes of the horses, the faces of the horses and the jockeys are not sharp. It looks as if these advertisement here is sharper than the actual horses, which is the focal point of the image. So I think in this particular case, perhaps the shutter speed was not high enough, and as a result, there's some softness reflected in the image. This one is called Wonder, and again, you can probably see all these pixelation and artifacts in the image. I think there's a lot of issues with this image from the point of view of technical delivery. There's other issues in terms of things that should have been cloned and cleaned up a bit. But overall, you can see how the image, I don't know whether it's been sent in a very poor resolution or whether the post-processing has been messed somehow, but there are technical flaws in this image. This one is called Misty Morning, I believe. And I like the tonality, and the title reflects what the image says, Misty Morning, perfectly. I would have suggested that the photographer would have taken an image a bit more to the right in here. And I'll tell you why, because there's a house here that is adding little or nothing to the image. It's the back of a house. Whereas here we have the fronts of houses. I would have probably preferred the image to be taken here, a bit more to the right on the frame and showing me these houses. I think this house on the left contributes little or nothing to the image. It would have been perhaps nicer to take a tiny bit more position to the right hand side in order to deliver this more interesting element than this. Tonality wise is lovely. It basically reflects what it says in the title. It's a misty morning, beautiful tones, the sun, the fog, the greens. Very nice, nice tonality overall. This is Glencoe, I believe. I've never been there, but I've seen many images of this place, and obviously long exposure. You can see the water movement here. You can also see in the background what I believe is maybe a tree, a small tree moving a lot with that long exposure. You can see the branches moving quite frantically here. I would have probably suggested a tiny bit more space on the top, perhaps. I think it's a bit too tight in there, and cutting perhaps this side here. So I would have probably suggested maybe loosening this part here, which doesn't add much to the image, and perhaps leaving a bit more space at the top for the image to breathe a bit more. Tonality is beautiful. The blue is very well controlled. The yellows and the oranges is very well controlled without oversaturating them, which is something that sometimes can happen very, very often. So from that point of view, it's been well controlled in that regard. This is called Dingle. And again, when I opened the image, I thought, beautiful. I mean, especially I love this swirl of this wave here, and how the rock obviously stays there static versus the mobility and the cloud. Sorry, the wave moving. The tonality of the water is beautiful, with the sky well control. But again, if you look at the one dot spot, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, at least 15 dot spots in the image. That unfortunately has to be penalized in the scoring, and it's a pity, because what could have been it is a very nice image, but it could have rated very well. Unfortunately, has to be penalized for those technical flaws. Oops. Let me come back again. This is called, I believe, 60 Seconds in Clifton. And again, beautiful image. I really like the tonality of it. I would imagine that this is a boy in there. And again, if it had been a bit bigger, it could have been logical to maintain it. I think it adds nothing but kind of, what is that in the distance? That little tiny thing. I would have been more inclined to perhaps get rid of it, because it's not that big to notice what it is. If it had been bigger, perhaps keep it. But the tonality is beautiful. The low shutter speed, fantastic control. And again, the title says it, 60 seconds. This is another image that I would like to come back later on when I comment in more detail. This is called Isolation. And I don't know why, it looks as if to me this image is a bit tilted to the left. I know that might not necessarily be the case. I know these jetties could be like that in terms of the perspective, but I would have perhaps tilted a tiny little bit to the right. You can see the fisherman engrossed in his activity. It tells a story to a certain level, but to me, there's a huge element here that conveys very little. Perhaps this image, because of this tonality, could have been perhaps better in black and white. I don't know. It's a matter of testing that. So I would encourage the photographer to perhaps try this in black and white and see what kind of results he or she could get. This is called Spring Growth. And again, nice image. I like the tonality. A tiny bit on the dark side, but it's fine. Nothing too much to worry about. Perhaps this is a bit distracting here, but there's nothing much you can do about that other than controlling the composition a bit better when you take the image. But overall, is fine. Nice control of the white element in the center-ish of the image. This is called Springtime, and again, beautiful red tones. And in this image, you can see very deliberately a central point here. If we look back at the other image, it was called Poppies, I believe. It was soft overall. There was no focal point in this image. You can see a very clear point of focus in there. So from that purpose, from that point of view, it covers the purpose of it. These are called rhinos. And again, nice image of two rhinos supposedly fighting. Who knows? But again, I think I'm missing too much with the background. Is a bit perhaps too distracting. This is an image that perhaps would have been a bit enhanced by focusing more on the actual heads and cropping tighter to eliminate all this mud in the background and concentrating perhaps on the eyes of the rhinos, on the fight, so to speak, as opposed to having this mud in the background a bit interfering with the impact of the. This is called Tranquility, And again, obviously, very high dynamic range, very bright skies, very dark silhouette. You have here the swan. And again, we have a little element here that has to be taken care of. Nice tonality in the reds and so, but again, you need to be careful with these little aspects that may hinder an image. This is the jumping squirrel. And the jumping squirrel, again, it does exactly what it says on the tin. He's jumping big time. Difficult image again from the point of view of speed, short speed to make sure. And from that purpose, it is a bit soft, tiny bit soft. It's not too bad, but it's a bit soft. Perhaps the distracting element to me is this element here and this element in here that could have been very easily got rid of. But it's a nice action shot from the point of view of the squirrel jumping. Nice tonality of the reds and the action with the knot as well being caught. Kingfishers. Again, I don't know whether this is a dust spot, but like I was saying before in my introduction, don't give the assessors any inkling to think that it is. It might not be. It might be a bit of grass moving, or it might be something else. But at first sight, your eye goes there and you think, is that a dust spot or not? And again, this white element is a bit distracting as well. Could have been easily removed. But beautiful tonality in the kingfishers. I don't know whether the background has been post-process. I'm not sure that's depth of field, or whether that has been manipulated purposely. And if so, I find it as a tad bit excessive, but I'm not sure whether it has been done either way. But beautiful tonality nonetheless in the kingfishers. This is called Night Fox. And the problem, as you can see here with this image, is unfortunately the amount of noise. Obviously, it looks as if it's been taken at night time. You can see reflections here in the eye of the fox. And I would imagine, obviously, that perhaps the ISO has been pumped up too high and there's noise or any other issue. But again, it captures a beautiful image of an expression and glare of the fox. But unfortunately, there's too much noise in the image. I don't know whether the photographer has tried to reduce that or not. Could easily try and do that through different tools. It's worth trying by all means. This is got one, and he got one. And a beautiful action shot, obviously. Fantastic colors. The problem with this image again is extremely difficult. I am fully aware of the technical difficulty of getting a pin sharp image of a kingfisher. But if you put forward an image of an action like the horses or something like this, make sure that it's very sharp, because otherwise it's going to have a negative effect on the image. Tonality wise it's beautiful, compositionally it's beautiful, the cropping works in terms of the square format. The moment of catching the fish is fantastic. It's just a pity that it's a tiny bit soft. Okay. This image is called On the Lookout. And again, a beautiful expression here. I see something strange with this image here. I can see this is very sharp. This is very unsharp and out of focus. The depth of field, if these were two parallel images or elements within the image, I'm not sure they would warrant that differential in the depth of field. I can see perhaps something here as well in terms of this line. I cannot put all my certainty about this, but I have the impression that this is some manipulation here. But very nice expression, very nice tonality, but I have concerns about that. This is called Coffee Walk, and again, it's a very interesting street shot with all the reflections. You have the Starbucks sign here, you have other signs here, and it's an interesting shot from the point of view that there's so much to look at, and not only have the pedestrian, you have the reflection of the pedestrian, you have somebody here, you look something like maybe it's a bus stop or something here. I'm not sure what it is, but it looks like a bus stop or something like that. I think this might be a bus coming. You have the Starbucks. There's a huge amount of elements that you can see. Is that a printer for an office or something? So an interesting shot, and obviously a lot to think about this image, and well composed. I like how it's composed and how it's been treated. This is called the spider look. Spiders are probably one of my most fearful animals for me, with snakes. Pity about this little line here. I know it's maybe part of the, I don't know, but it could have been a little clone, that little line there, perhaps clone that. It doesn't add anything to the image, and at the same time it distracts from it. But I love the reflection here, and all the legs, how it's reflected. From that point of view, it's nice to look at. It's interesting to look at. Freedom Tower. I got the suspicion that somebody knew I was coming to judge when they put this architectural image in front of me. Beautiful symmetry. What can I say? I mean, if you want to do a symmetrical image, it has to be symmetrical. It has to be very, very well lined up. And in this case, this is very well lined up. If I were to suggest a little tiny, very pernickety thing, would be to clone that little white spot there, and maybe that black line in there, just to make sure that your eye doesn't go to that little white dot. The tonality of the sky is very good. Sometimes people make mistakes, and I'll talk about that later on when dealing with sky tonality, so in another image. But the sky is well reflected in the tonality, in the saturation, the hue and everything. So a very fine image. This is called Shepherd's Delight. And Shepherd's Delight, I think, is a very fine image. To me, in my personal opinion, is a bit too red. It's a bit too much. I'm not disputing that it was probably that. There's a beautiful control of the low shutter speed and the waters, the milkiness and everything. The silkiness is fantastic. It's absolutely beautiful compositionally, and the treatment and how the water flows and everything's beautiful. To me, that's a bit too much red. I would have probably tried to control that through the temperature of the image, or indeed getting the red channel, the orange channel, either in Lightroom or in Photoshop or in Capture One or whatever, and try to work that a bit. To me, it's a beautiful image, but I find it a tiny bit oversaturated. This is called America Bound, and the title basically says it all. A mother and children. I was wondering again if the photographer had taken a different position to take this image, and rather than giving us this house here, which has nothing to add to the frame, if the photographer had moved a bit more to the left and show us the ocean or the coastline here, perhaps it would have been a bit more attractive. I know there's a boat in here, but somehow I think the side to the right with the sea would have been a bit more attractive than the house here, which doesn't add that much to the image. So again, make sure that when you compose an image, you look around you, you look at the best potential composition that you may have, rather than just standing in front of the statue and take it, move around it, frame it correctly, make sure if there's anything in the background that is taken away from it, and see if you can maximize the opportunity by looking somewhere else and improve the composition in the background. This is called Crescent in Cove. Beautiful images, beautiful houses, really clean, really fantastic. Again, the little things like, I would have cloned those little patches of the chimney that are kind of broken paint or whatever. This is so immaculate and so bright and so clean and so tight and fantastic. And then we have those little 2 patches there that would have taken seconds to clean that and give the image that extra little bit of refinement that is missing. But it's a beautiful location, obviously, beautiful houses, beautiful tonality, color temperature is fantastic as well. So very pleasant image. The next one is called Long Strand Sunset. And again, going back to the point I was making before, this looks as if it's part of a cloud, but again, if in doubt, give it a little spot healing, get rid of it. You know, make sure that nobody is under an illusion that it might be a dust spot. Again, I think the reds are a tad bit oversaturated, but also what I find is that the shadow area perhaps is been open a bit too much. I would have liked to see maybe a bit more mid-tones perhaps, but nonetheless, fantastic composition. It's a beautiful, beautiful image with beautiful definition in the rocks. And beautiful, I mean, the treatment is fine in terms of sharpening, everything is fine, is correct. There's nothing to object there. The rock. This is, again, an image that suits the purpose very well in the square crop format. I don't know if you'll be able to see it in the recording, but at the top of the rock, there's like a halo there, like a red, like a circle there. Something's happened there. I don't know what it was. Don't know what it was. I couldn't tell you. But obviously something has been manipulated there to the point that is quite visible. So other than that, the beautiful image, the slow shutter speed, it's fantastic how the water is flowing here. Very ethereal, very ephemeral as well. Tonality is fantastic, composition is very good. The cropping factor is very good. I would just look after that element there in order to improve it a tiny bit. This is called Trails, and I think it's a fantastic image. I mean, I love the swirl of the wave and all these trails that are leaving in the sand and how the tide is coming up and back again. And all these little pebbles here, the little pebbles here, the bigger rocks, and then the big rocks, the wave, the tonality of the orange tones here, the blue tones here, the color of the sea. It's an absolutely stunning image. So very nice indeed. Very, very nice compositionally, and how it has been handled in post-processing as well is very nice. This is called Triangles, and if I'm not mistaken, this is a typical shot from Lofoten in Norway, even though I've never been there. I've seen this very characteristic yellow hut in many images. And the title is called Triangles, and obviously there's a triangles here with that triangle. It makes sense completely. Nice image. It's funny because many of these images that I've seen before of this hut show the enormity and the vastness of the landscape in contraposition with the hut being so small compared to the vast element of the nature. That's the preferential choice of the photographer, and that's fine. I have nothing to object to that. So it's well treated and is well composed, is well seen in terms of compositionally of the triangles. And from that point of view, the treatment is well done as well. This is called Windows. I would imagine this is Amsterdam. I would imagine. I don't know. So colorful, isn't it? It's full of life. Every window that you look at, you see something different. You see green tones in here. You see red tones in there. You see all kinds of different things. You see no lights in here, plenty of lights in there. Reflections here in different tonalities, the greens, the yellows, the oranges. A very striking image. I would suggest perhaps, I think it might be a bit tilted a tiny bit to the left, very, very, very slightly. So perhaps have a look again. I'm talking very, very minimal thing, but it's very striking. It's a nice image. I really like it. This is called Icelandic horse. And again, this is an image, obviously, I would assume this is snow in the background, I would imagine. I think it's a bit soft in terms of, I would have liked to see this area a tiny bit sharper and the hair a bit more vibrant, a bit more, you know, a punch in that regard. Perhaps even a tighter crop, who knows, perhaps a crop that is even more focusing on the eye and the actual hair of the horse, eliminating this background which doesn't add much to the image, but it's a nice image, perhaps lacking a tiny bit of punch in the definition of the hair. Okay, this is called Industrial Landscape, and you can see how there's plenty of issues in terms of dust spots here, dust spots there, but this is as if there's plenty of lines as well. Also, I would say that, you know, making sure that this image is a bit tilted a bit more to the right, you know, to make this vertical. After all, you're talking about an industrial structure, and it should be straight or vertical in that regard. But you can see how there's many elements here that are very confusing to the image. So I would recommend to fix those. And again, I think there might be a couple of issues here. I don't know whether that's a bird, but again, if in doubt, give no error to anybody to think that it might be a dust spot. There's little elements here in this image, like there's little things here that are a bit distracting. I don't know what they are, but it's very striking. I mean, the red and the white works really well. It's very striking from that point of view. The next image is called Architectural Child and Family Center. I'm going to try and bring those down. Can you see my screen better now? Right. Very clean image. I like the colors that are rendered here. I mean, you have the blues, the light blue, the green, the fantastic color. These little clouds is really probably something to consider maybe getting rid of. It's much whiter than the others in tonality. If it were here, perfect, you leave it. If it's there, kind of a bit distracting, a bit annoying in that it doesn't add anything to the purpose of the image, perhaps cloning that. But it's well seen, well composed image, very bright, very, very striking colors as well, and very well processed. The next one is called Architectural Kingspan, and this is a real missed opportunity. This is an image that could be a fantastic image. And you can see here how there's been cloning and pasting here. But also here you can see the lines of this cloning of the building. So this is there and there and there, that triangle there, which corresponds with that triangle there, that, and that, and that. So I'm afraid this image, you know, cannot be considered highly for that reason, and has been penalized for that. But it has all the likes of a fantastic image. And again, you can see how here you have a dust spot in there as well. But it's a pity, because in terms of composition is lovely, in terms of the building is lovely, the tonality of the sky is lovely, but all these cloning elements here have been left there, and unfortunately. This is called Enjoy, and I'm sure the person doing that had a fantastic time doing this. Beautiful in terms of how it's been delivered, the tonality, the composition, the brightness is really an engaging image that obviously it pays homage to the title, Enjoy. I mean, that's exactly that. And from that point of view, it's fantastic how you can see this reflecting and kind of bouncing off the ground, so to speak. And you can see the shoe prints as well. It's fantastic in that point of view. So it's a lovely image. This is called Look Up, and that image really caught my eye. I don't know why, not because it's architectural, but there's something about it. It's just the tonality of the reds, the whites, the moon. It's a really intriguing image, and I really like all the negative space, all the black. It's really, really interesting. An image that I really liked, I must say. This is called Superb Effort. And again, this image is nice. Obviously, it's taken the athlete jumping at the precise moment where he's clearing the bar. It's a pity in that if he was, let's say, a bigger angle or wider angle, we would have seen these people in their entirety. Because it's too tightly cropped, we missed them. So that warrants the thought of, do we only want to keep the athlete and get rid of these people and then crop tighter again? Or do we want to make it even wider angle and maintain the spectators looking at the athlete jumping? That's something that I would suggest you consider when you compose images of this nature. There's a couple of artifacts here as well that you have to be taken care of, but that's a minor point. But again, think of those compositional tips when you compose an image of this kind. Okay. This is called Donald Lunny, and this is an image that I would like to comment on later on as well. I think it's a fantastic image. I'll come back to it. The lighting is superb. Donald Lunny, obviously an absolute legend. I will come back to this image later on, and I will explain a couple of suggestions in more detail. This is called Queen. A pity that is a tiny bit soft. The color temperature of the skin tones is a bit off, in my opinion. And it's a pity that the arm is just covering the mouth of the Freddie Mercury lookalike. It's nice in many aspects, but it's a pity that if only that arm would have been somewhere else. It's a pity that it covers the expression of the face and the singing a bit. But obviously, it's not an easy shot to take in those conditions, in lighting conditions. But an interesting shot nonetheless. Cognevara, this is County Cork, if I'm not mistaken. Very typical image of the place with a reflection, very clear reflection. The sky is a pity that it doesn't have a lot of definition, but that's the weather sometimes for you. It is what it is, and you don't have that sky to go with it. But in terms of the image, is a very serene, very peaceful, very placid image. The greens are well controlled, they're not oversaturated, the same as the yellows. The reflection is very clear, very well, very nice, very nicely done. A very pleasant image indeed. Port of Cork. I found this image a tiny bit soft in some areas. I would have liked a bit more punchier perhaps. Obviously blue light, but I think it's a bit tad late for the blue light. It's a bit too dark for that. I love the light burst. Probably, I don't know, F11 upwards, F16 perhaps, something like that, or if, who knows. But nonetheless, I get the feeling as well as if it's tilted a teeny tiny bit to the left. But again, I love the tonality of the cyan tones here with the yellows, and the light burst is fantastic. A very pleasant image to look at. Vintage Pump, and again, it reflects exactly what it says on the title. I think a bit more punch would have been nice with those burgundy colors. It's obviously a decrepit derelict old petrol station somewhere. And it's interesting from the point of view of how it goes in gallons as opposed to liters nowadays, the price per gallon. But again, perhaps the texture of the wood, the texture of that metal, the rustiness, everything, I think it requires a tiny bit more punch in terms of vibrancy. Perhaps cropping this thing here, which is like a metal box or something, perhaps cropping there to avoid that is really, it's in here as well, but this is a bigger element. This is just not adding anything, you know, or maybe cloning this into here or something like that. But nice image, but I think a tiny bit more vibrancy would have been fantastic. This is called Azure Magpipes, and it's nice how they are positioned. Whether they were there or whether they were done in post is really irrelevant at this point. It looks as if the image in my screen, it looks as if the image suffers from a tiny bit of over sharpening. You can see in the bird's chest here and the head and here. Again, perhaps that is a treatment that the photographer wants to achieve with some texture or something. But I like the game of the play of the diagonal with these other branches, the positioning, it works very well. The yellow orangey tonality at the bottom with the blue is very interesting as well. So it's a pleasant image. It's a pleasant image indeed. This is called Out for a Stroll, and I love how this little branch reflects here, and it looks as if this little bird is looking exactly at this juncture of the reflection of the branch here. Yeah? I love the zigzagging as well, whether that's intentionally in composition or not, or it was just by pure, luck. It doesn't really matter. But again, it's nicely treated, nice tonality, and it's lovely composition with that zigzagging of the water there. This image really caught my eye as well. Very fine action shots of the surfer. But again, this is a good action shot. It is sharp, it's pin sharp. The surfer is pin sharp, his face, his hand. It really is capturing the moment, the skill, the coldness of the water through the suit and the wetsuit that he's wearing. I really like the image, the splash of the water, the wave, the concentration. It really is a nice image to look at indeed. This is called Entrepreneur. I looked at this image and I'm thinking somewhere rural in some tribe in Africa, and then I see these blocks of concrete here, which looks like a semicircle here. I would imagine maybe it's a river or something, or like a little bridge or something. And again, this image is a pity that it's been cropped. I mean, he's holding some decorations like necklaces or whatever, like he's wearing or she's wearing or whatever. It's a pity that the hand has been cropped in there. It's a pity that we don't see what's going on in here and the hand positioning as well. But tonality wise, beautiful bright colors, fantastic expression. It's a pity about that hand that is missing in a way. And this is called Please Buy My Bananas. It's a tiny pity that's been cropped there, and the feet have been cropped there. So it's a tiny bit, I'm missing, like, okay, to that effect, would you crop her somewhere else to not to just, miss her right foot? But it's a lovely engagement, lovely facial expression, looking straight into the camera lens. The brightness of the red and the white works very well. The greens, tonality wise, is very nice. It's just a pity about that cropping and that cropping there. Just take those things into account when composing. This is called Landing. And again, you can see often, I would imagine it's the Salties, I don't know, could be anywhere, but I would imagine that's a normal destination for people to take puffins. fantastic shot. I really like the color, the movement, the fish caught by the puffin. And here's the interesting thing, right? You have a drop in there and a drop in there and 2 drops in there, which is part of the catching of the fish, right? And it's completely logical to have them. I would have perhaps cloned that little thing there because there's a white dot in there that is adding nothing to it. It's kind of distracting a bit. This absolutely makes sense because these are drops coming from the fish, but this one perhaps could have been cloned. But it's a fantastic shot, pin sharp. The eye of the puffin is absolutely pin sharp. The color is beautiful. The orange, the greens. It's a very, very fine image. I really like it. This is called Mating Time, and very appropriately so. Again, there's a dot spot in there, guys. Be very, very careful with those things. It was a fantastic image. I mean, the tonality, the expression, the color of the eyes, the depth of field, the clarity, the brightness, the processing. It's a really, really fine image. Really, really nice. And the sharpness is absolutely spot on. So a very fine image indeed. This is called Taking Its Prey. And again, you can see all the feathers coming out of the prey here. A very apt image to the title. And again, it's a beautiful moment in the sense of the depth of field is fantastic. The clarity of the moss and the branch and the bird and the feathers and everything falling down. You can even see this one, so you can imagine kind of coming down the hill there like that, strolling along. Absolutely fantastic image in terms of tonality, composition, processing, and color. This is called Hoodie, and of course, a very personal family occasion. Young boy or girl, I don't know, probably a boy, pretty much newborn with, I would imagine, the father. And it's a fantastic memory for the family occasion. Very nice color, the expression is fantastic. And the image engages you in that it sends that image of the father protecting the newborn. And it's very caring from that point of view. So you can see there's a story behind the image. It's an engaging image. It's not just a father holding a child or anything. It's just that moment of, I'll take care of you. I'm minding you. I have you. So the same as this one. This one is called Love, and a very appropriate title to the image again. If I were to maybe comment on something, perhaps the newborn's skin tone perhaps could be worked on a bit. Is a bit too red, but again, obviously the poor fella is a young kid. That's the tonality he has, but obviously it's very obvious in comparison with the father. But it's a beautiful image that absolutely conveys the protection of the father to the newborn, and that link and the title, Love. So fantastic from that point of view. Really, really nice image. This is called Blue, and yes, it's blue. Absolutely. It's a lovely composite, very refined image to a very high level of photography. I would like to comment on this image later on when I finish the next one as well. And this is called White. And again, I love the way how the model is throwing the cloth or the gown or whatever it's called in English, the cloth into the air, and the movement, and it's fantastic how it's creating this shape, this triangle, this wave in here, undulation, and it's fantastic tonality between the white, the skin tones, and the stone of the church in the background. It's really, really nice image. I think, Paul, if you don't mind, I would like to comment on 4 images now. Is that okay before we go into the black and white? Is that okay? So one of the images I would like to comment on is this blue one. Like I was saying, a very, very high level photography, couple of very minuscule, but when you go to this level, you have to be extremely, extremely pernickety and extremely accurate with things. There's an artifact here in this axis here of that junction. There's a black element in there that needs working on. You can see how it's very obvious with this and this. I would suggest that the photographer works on that area. And the other aspect that I would comment on, and again, being extremely pernickety, but at this level, you have to be, is there's a white dot, there's a white dot, there's a white dot, and there's a white dot. It will take you 2 seconds to get rid of those. But it's a very high level photography, done very well. And the tonality of the skin is fantastic. The shawl is fantastic. And then the background is some kind of a bluish cyanotype treatment that works very well, in my opinion. Strong image, very well done composite. One could argue as well that if you want to be, again, very pernickety, this area has no stone like here. Should you get rid of that element in here in order to make it consistent with this side? Those are just suggestions that I'm giving. I'm not saying that I'm right or wrong. They are things to consider by the photographer, and I hope they make sense. And I know I'm very pernickety about those matters, but I think it makes sense to revisit those at this level of photography. The other image that I would like to comment on is the one by Donald Lunny. I think it's an absolutely stunning image. The light is superb. You can see the guitar head here coming back from here. Beautiful light again, the guitar. Again, there's the white spot in there that can be eliminated very easily. But more importantly, I would consider, and I'm not saying that it will work or not, but I would consider, given that this other female, the female here doesn't add anything to the image, would it be appropriate to perhaps crop in here, get rid of her as much as possible, and maybe come up to there and there. And you have the light in the guitar, but maybe eliminate this distracting element. I would suggest to try if it works. It might not work, but it's worth considering perhaps looking into that. Another image that I would like to comment on is called Trails. And this is, again, a beautiful image that I think in terms of the shutter speed is fantastic, very well controlled, how the waves are coming up and down again, leaving those trails in the sand, the little pebbles, the big pebbles, the composition of these ones, the tonality here, the pinky and the redness of that. Fantastic image. So I think this is an image that covers a lot of the requirements of high-end seascape photography. I would like to comment on 2 more images on the color section. One of them is called 60 Seconds in Clivedon. When I look at this image, my first impression was, wow, I love it. I love not only the architectural element of it, but I love the tonality, I love the composition, I love the serenity, I love the 60-second, the long exposure, the color treatment, everything. I think I commented before about this boy maybe can be eliminated because he doesn't add that much in terms of, it's not that big to be recognized. But then I saw this. And that is an absolutely huge dot spot in there. And it's a pity because unfortunately the image needs to be penalized for that, but it is an absolutely beautiful image. Absolutely beautiful. I think is the evening tonality, I would assume is evening time, evening tonality, the sun coming into this part of the pier, the color, the saturation, the serenity is absolutely beautiful image. But that's a flaw that you cannot afford to have in high-end photography. And another image that I would like to comment on the color section is this one. And I find this image very nice in terms of the light. What I find a bit off-putting is the tonality of the blues in the sky. remember that when you increase the saturation of the sky in the blue channel, either in Lightroom or in Photoshop, there's a tendency by people to make the blues darker by increasing the saturation and reducing the luminosity. And that in fact makes the blue darker. However, the hue channel then is messed up. So I think it's very, very important to come back to this image and look at this color of the sky. In my opinion, it's a bit too purplish, and perhaps making sure that the saturation is decreased a tiny bit, but also look at the luminosity and the hue channels. You have those three elements to consider in that. So please come back, revisit that sky. It's a beautiful image, but I think the blue is a tiny bit off, in my opinion. Okay, which again is debatable. I'm not saying that I'm right. Okay, so with that, let's move on into the black and white section. And in the black and white section, we have 16 images, I think. This is untitled, and it's an image that it's a nice study of street life in a way. You see I assume an old pensioner looking at, I don't know if it's a park or a sea or a lake or whatever it is, it doesn't matter. And this young guy is pretty much looking at the same direction. There's no tonality in the sky, but that's fine. It's a black and white image. It's a street photography. I would imagine maybe it's taken with a compact camera, with a mobile phone, probably a compact camera. But it's interesting from the point of view of it tells a story. They're looking at something generationally that belong to two different generations, and they're still looking at something that is called their attention. So from that point of view, it's an interesting one. This is unfortunately the times we're living in, the COVID-19 scourge that we're going through at the moment. And it's very obvious, a patient or a person going to a chemist to buy some medicines or prescription, whatever, and the pharmacy attendant with full gear with the mask on. It's a tiny bit grainy, as you can see in this area. Now, perhaps that is the intention of the photographer, given that it's nearly like a street photography, if you wish to call it that. Black and white tonality, maybe that grain has been added purposely. I don't know. I'm just noticing that fact. I'm not saying that it's right or wrong, but it's a very engaging situation of the door ajar kind of thing, but not fully open, as in, okay, what do you want? You can come in kind of thing. So it tells a story for sure, and it's very engaging from that point of view. This is called Horganski, and again, I have issues with this image. I have issues, number one, in the sense that it's very, very soft. It doesn't need to be sharp. But look at these elements in here. You can see that sky, something being cloned there. You can see a dust spot in here, but you can see here and here and here and here. So I don't know whether they were completely blown out and the photographer has tried to bring down that. Another element here, you can see lines in there, 3 lines. So there's a lot of artifacts that at this level you cannot afford to make those mistakes and send that for a competition. This is called Lone Tree. Beautiful image, very serene. A tiny bit on the soft side, but compositionally is very strong, and I really like how the horizon of the lake is very much on the thirds. This positioning is very well again in there. The reflection here, a very pleasant, very serene image that works very well in black and white. This is called Grand Central Station Commuters, very aptly. I haven't been there. It's one of those locations that I would love to go and try and do some kind of photography like this. Beautiful. I mean, you can see what caught my eye was that the movement of these people walking, and this lady is completely and utterly still, and it tells the balance between the people moving and commuting quickly to their destinations, and this lady is checking a phone. This little thing on the ground there, I don't know what that is. Perhaps that could be eliminated because, I don't know, could be a paper, could be anything. But it's a very interesting scene telling of real life of commuters rushing to their destinations, and is very well treated in terms of treatment and post-processing. This is called Solar Louvers, and again, this is a very interesting image, partly because I love this kind of architectural, fine art, imagery kind of thing. My recommendation with this image would be to, and again, when you're talking about this type of architectural type imagery, or very analytical, very symmetrical type of imagery, you need to be very precise in the post-processing, and things like that. For instance, that diagonal line here, which corresponds with this window in the background, right? But clone that visually, it'll be much neater, much cleaner image once you get rid of that, and those little dots in there and that little thing in there. But I love the composition. I love the diagonals. They work very well, and you have like a gradation from the dark blackish to the grays to the whites, again to the black, gray, and whites. And you have the opposite effect here from the right to the left, the blacks, the grays, the whites, the grays, lighter grays, etc. So it works really well. I would just encourage the photographer to tidy up those little things to make sure that the image looks more clinical, because by nature of the image, I think it's an image that requires that finishing, that polished finish in the image. This is called Back from the Dead, and I would like to comment later on this, if I may. Let's move on to Love Valencia, which is obviously in Valencia, Spain, by Calatrava. I feel that this image is a bit of a missed opportunity, because on the one hand, it's giving me this structure here, and on the other hand, it's missing the arches here, which is a beautiful area with gardens inside. I would have perhaps turned towards my left a bit more, perhaps missing this area and giving me this arch, or the other way around. However, the other way around wouldn't have given you the focal point of the father and the daughter. So from that point of view, perhaps compositionally, it would have been better to turn a bit more to the left and include this area and discard this metal structure here. This is called Dangerous Look, and it reflects what it says in the title. A tiny pity that the model is not looking at the photographer lens with a glaring eye and provocative expression. In terms of imagery, it is what it reflects in the title. Pretty much, fine. The treatment is fine. The black and white is fine. That's perhaps a bit distracting, but not a major issue. But obviously, the tonality has been well handled, and the processing as well. This is called Reflect Walker, and again, it's a very interesting shot in the sense that it probably is, I don't know, maybe a second in exposure, something like that. And not only we have the shutter speeding here, but we also have the reflection here. Something that you cannot control is obviously the dirt in this glass and all these artifacts happening here, but that's part and parcel of the image as well. It's street photography, and it has those things as well, you know. So it's fine from that point of view. It's a strong image. It's a very engaging image that makes the assessor and the viewer think about this in more detail, looking at the reflections and the stains and everything in the pavement. So it's a very engaging image from that point of view. This is called Ballycotton, and I like the way this image is treated and is processed. I mean, beautiful low shutter speed here with all these movement of the water, and again all these the foam and everything forming in these shapes. Coming back to the point I was making before, these are probably rocks. This is a very obvious rock, but that's debate. Well, it probably is, but maybe clone it so nobody thinks it's a dust spot. But it's beautiful in terms of the treatment. I can see a spot in there by any chance, a tiny little one there. Compositionally, treatment-wise, exposure, definition, fantastic image, really nice. And this diagonal really works very, very well, coming to this bottom corner of the image, coming up to define this horizontal line with the with that main inlet. So it's fantastic image. This is called San Marco in Venice, and I love the light bursting here, how it's reflected, and again, I don't know the f-stop, but probably somewhere in between f11 and higher, f20 something, I don't know. Fantastic image. This is very well framed. You have the tower here and here. You can see a bit of a halo here in that area, but nothing major. And again, I get the feeling that the image is a bit tilted and it could have been corrected in terms of this horizontal correction and vertical correction a bit more, perhaps. If you're doing some kind of architectural or city image like this, it's important to have that symmetry that you're looking at. So perhaps it's important to revisit this image and see if you can correct that horizontal perspective a bit more and square it a bit more in order to create a more defined and more correct composition. But it's lovely. It's a lovely image. This is called Architectural Jaguar, and if I'm not mistaken, this is in Shannon. This is the Jaguar building in Shannon, I believe. And again, a couple of spots here as well. There's another one here. The sky I find very grainy. I couldn't tell whether it has been pasted or not. That's irrelevant anyway at this point in time. It is very grainy in the treatment. So there's a softness to the image as well. It's a beautiful image in terms of composition. It's a fantastic building. Composition is beautiful. It's very, very striking diagonals here with this point going that way. It's a fantastic composition, but it's lacking on some technical elements and some artifacts in the image. But perhaps it's worth revisiting the image and having a look at those issues. This is called Cork Folk Festival, and this is an image I want to comment on in the next few minutes, if I can come back to it again, please. This is called Angel Wings, and again, I assume it's the same baby as the color section. I don't know, but I get the feeling that it is. A beautiful image of the kid, completely relaxed and asleep. I find the background a bit distracting in that I don't know what kind of manipulation has been done, if any, but you can see these patterns of, it's a bit distracting from that point of view. It's very soft in here. It's a bit soft even on the face as well. You could even see that perhaps this area is a bit sharper than this area, which probably the emphasis on the focal point should have been placed on the eyes rather than here. But it's a beautiful image in the sense of the serenity that it conveys and the engagement of probably the father taking the image, or the mother, or a relative. It's a very precious memory of the child. And I wonder what this is. I have no idea. Of course, this is the atrium in the Guggenheim in Bilbao. Again, this poses huge dynamic range when you photograph inside that museum, and tends to create this kind of issues that you have total blacks and total whites, because remember, you're in Spain. If you go in the summertime or Easter, when people take holidays normally, the sun could be very, very harsh. It's a pity that this is beautiful lines, obviously, and this beautiful triangle. It's a pity about this, because if only this triangle would have been placed here, you would have had a much more distinctive composition. You would have had this element of white. You would have that triangle there. and you wouldn't have broken this line here with a little tip in there. So from the point of view of composition, it's a fantastic idea and concept. I think in terms of execution, perhaps it would have been better to place that in here in order to avoid that clash with this line and this little segment coming in here, and this little things that probably can be corrected in post-processing. But that is part and parcel of the structure as well. Is plaster, is wear and tear, there are stains, there are lines, and that's part of the thing. If you really want to execute fine art at this kind of imagery, you really need to work on those issues a bit more. But compositionally is good. I think it could have been improved by separating and differentiating that triangle from this curve. I think that's the last image from the black and white section. What I want to comment is on a couple of images. I want to comment first on Lone Tree. And Lone Tree, I think it's this one. Beautiful image, very serene. It's a bit on the soft side. But I'm not too concerned about that. I think in terms of the reflection, the position of the tree in the third here, the water in the third as well, these little elements as well, it really is a very nice image in terms of composition and treatment. Again, look at this little dust spot here. Please be very, very careful of those things. But overall, it's a very pleasing image to look at. This image, it's fantastic. There are technical issues with this image. The things that are distracting, like these lines probably from a door or from whatever, I don't know what it is. But by God, it tells you back from the dead. It really means the title of the image, and it's really striking. And the engagement of the young girl looking at the camera and all the stitches, I would assume it's Halloween. It's just really, really striking pose, and it's a very, very strong image from that point of view. Are there technical issues with the image? Yes, there's a few technical issues, but to me, this is an example where the content and the subject matter is more important to a certain extent than the technical issues. So a very good attempt from that point of view. Ballycotton, it's this one I commented before. Beautiful image in terms of treatment, composition, diagonal, the horizontal. The only negative in inverted commas would be that dust spot, okay? But how the long exposures be treated, the foam on the sand and everything, I think it's a fantastic image. Really, really nice image. And the other image that I want to comment on is the Cork Folk Festival. I love this image. I think it's so engaging. And you can see the man, you can see his whole life reflected in that face. And you can see the concentration while he's playing his concert. The light is fantastic. You can see pure seriousness, concentration in the man. The only things that I would recommend to do, and again, it's only a recommendation, do as you wish, is those white elements are very distracting. It takes you 3 minutes, 2 minutes to get that out of there, convert it into black like that, and that, and that. That will give you a much more stronger focal point to the man. You open the image and you go, beautiful image. And then you look at those three things and go, why didn't we get rid of them? That would be the only concern that I would have. But the engagement of the image, the journey of the man playing the concert with the microphones and the whole thing, and the pure concentration and the lighting, I think it's a very, very nice image indeed. I think this completes the judging of the images in the color section and in the black and white section. So thank you very much. I think that concludes the session for today. I hope this was helpful and useful to whatever degree. take it with a pinch of salt. One aspect I would like to re-emphasize time and time again, please, artifacts in images, dot spots, things like that, cloning elements, be absolutely sure that they are controlled at high level photography. And as usual, you know where to contact me, social media, my email as well, my phone number. If you want to comment or come back to me with any questions you may have, you'll be more than welcome to do so, and I'll be happy to help. Okay, thank you and good night.